Friends, this is the second panel discussion for this program, and I thank my colleague, Professor Narendra Pani, to have coordinated this panel discussion, and you have already listened to Professor Pani and you know his background. So now let me request Professor Narendra Pani to conduct this panel discussion.
Good afternoon, and welcome to this panel discussion on the media. These are not really the best of times to discuss the media. I think the news that we get from the media, as we've got right through 2008, has been so bad that very often there has been a temptation to shoot the messenger. But more than the news that the media communicates, the news from within the industry is, if anything, even worse. It's an industry that since the early 1990s, when there was a change of technology, there was a fundamental change in the economic structure of the industry where it moved towards a dependence on advertising of a kind that was not seen before. And that dependence is now, with the global recession, beginning to hurt, and hurt very badly. Advertising revenues have collapsed in almost every major industry. There's a possibility of layoffs in some of the major players as well. So clearly there are a number of issues that have come up at the level of the industry's economic health, but that doesn't take anything away from the importance of the other issues that came up during the period when advertising gained dominance, a large number of ethical issues, a large number of structural issues. So when you talk of the media today, if you're going to get any kind of a picture, the canvas is indeed very large. Faced with this large canvas, the temptation is to just say, okay, that's too large, we're going to choose a particular area, a very narrow focus, and then keep the discussion to that. But I'm not so sure that's the best way to go forward, because there are very issues that are there. We still don't have an idea of all the issues that are there. And it might be better, we thought, to allow people to to even identify different issues in whichever framework they liked and from whichever perspective they liked, what was for them the most important. And we felt it would be better to get that done by people whose credentials in the industry are beyond question. And we've been extremely fortunate today that we have three such people with us. I think their detailed sort of biodatas or CVs are with you in the brochure, so I will not repeat it, other than to say very briefly, remind you of the kind of the kind of intellect and experience that we have with us today. Sashi Kumar has been was, for those, some of you might remember, the face of Doordarshan many years ago, went on to become a docu-feature, a maker of docu-features. He set up AsiaNet. He was the founder president of AsiaNet. He was a filmmaker, and he's now the head of Asian College of Journalism. So probably the most multifaceted personality in Indian journalism. We also have someone who's considered one of the certainly one of the most widely respected media analysts in the country today, Ms. Sevanti Ninan. Her columns in both the Hindustan Times and the Hindu are not just read, debated, and she has an ability to link up her immediate comment to larger, more in-depth work, as can be seen in several of her books. Her book on the Hindi press is in some ways a milestone in Indian writing about the media itself. And then we have as Gayatri Chandrashekar, who has had a field view and ability to see things from the ground, which obviously is an essential part of journalism. And she's done it in areas that are extremely sophisticated, particularly in space technology. So with people like that, I think I don't think it's important to hear about them. It's important to hear them. So let me just begin by requesting Sashi Kumar to start off the proceedings, but the norms that we'll set are just 10 minutes for each, and if any issues come up in which there are any differences between the three panelists, we'll have a discussion among them soon after the three of them finish, and after that it's open to everyone else. Sashi.
Thank you, Pani. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. As Pani indicated, we hope this will become a discussion, and in the process we'll have occasion to discuss this hydra-headed creature called the media. which is as inspiring as it's nonplussing nowadays. It's a very crucial component of democracy, no doubt. We respect the media because we know that it's, when you say democracy in the same breath, you also have to speak about a free media. A poor media would mean a poorer democracy. And yet the media is also in a sense at the crossroads now because partly because of technological reasons, partly because of ethical reasons, partly because there are constraints operating on the media even from within the channels of democracy. I think in a democracy we talk about the executive, the legislature, the judiciary, and then we talk about the fourth pillar of democracy, or the fourth estate, which is the free media. And while the executive, the legislature and the judiciary, all these three other pillars are accountable to the people, institutionally or constitutionally. You know, the executive is dependent on the legislature, at one remove it's dependent on the people. The legislature, of course, is directly dependent on the people. You have to go back to the people every 5 years and get a vote to be back there. The judiciary too is notionally dependent on the people, in the sense that, at least conceptually or notionally, you can impeach a judge with 2/3 majority in both houses of parliament and so on. So all these three pillars are institutionally or constitutionally dependent on the media, whereas it's the fourth estate or the press that is not institutionally or constitutionally dependent on the people, which is the way it should be. I'm not for a moment suggesting it should be any other way. Because if the media is accountable in an institutional or constitutional sense, if there are limitations placed on the media in that sense, that is not a free media, and that will be a poorer democracy. And therefore it devolves upon the media to put itself in the dock every once in a while, to introspect and see whether it is doing well by its mandate or furthering the cause of democracy in a context like ours. And it is with this, in this context that I would look at the media. And I think the first big difference that one sees, or the first emerging aspect of the media, is the technological change that's taking place in the media, which is in some ways making for a different media itself. The fact of technological convergence and the fact of digitization, which means that our traditional media, as the cold print, for instance, which we are used to with our morning coffee, that being the last word on the media, is already beleaguered, is already becoming a very difficult concept. We are talking about internet, we are talking about cyberspace as freewheeling media. Blogs have become a backyard of the media. Increasingly people are depending on blogs to understand the situation intimately, or to understand it, to make sense of the situation, because of the media, the traditional, the mainstream media don't seem to give us much information on situations, say of Iraq, for instance, or Gaza, where media has been forbidden to go in. So you're really dependent on blogs to know from local people, a cross-section of the population, what is happening there and so on. But then there are issues of verifiability on many of these aspects. Then there's a question of media being segmented also in the modern market. It's not as if there's one big media which is controlling all our attention or catering to all of us. So there's that whole challenge. So I think these are some of the challenges in terms of the media that we have been facing in our times, and how have we acquitted ourselves? How has the media practitioners acquitted themselves is a very big question. We know that media is now in the dock in another sense because of what happened in Mumbai, and that has been an occasion for letting loose a lot of venom against the media, because the media, particularly the electronic media, television, was seen as acting irresponsibly in rushing in and cover, and the kind of coverage that I think was compromising security, compromising human dignity, compromising a sense of fair and objective coverage, and so on and so forth. And this also tends to get exaggerated a bit, because it is true that in the initial phase the media did, I think, it can be, there were lots of sins of omission and commission, if you like, but at the same time I think it also helps in making people accountable. And in the Indian context we have seen in event after event, in case after case, that in the balance while the media can be accused of excesses, can be accused of unethical behavior and so on, in the balance, finally, a freewheeling media, for that matter, has helped us far more in making democracy accountable, in making the leadership, political leadership of this country, the economic leadership of this country accountable. What is it doing about it is a valid question, which comes to our minds. This is true of the political press as well. So the media is not, it's not as if the media has been an effective watchdog in all cases, but when an issue is out, I think it helps keep it in focus, helps keep it in the public glare. And therefore, the agenda-setting function of the media, I think, has been a very important aspect of the media's role. And the adversarial, what you call the critical adversarial role of the media, has been the other very important role. And the media's role is to be adversarial, in my opinion. It's not the media's role really. And when I speak to some of the, say, in the corporate world or to people in high positions in government, there is often this thing thrown at the media that the media is not positive. It doesn't talk about the good things that we do, it only talks about the bad things that we do. Which is partly true, but then I think the vital role of the media is to look for an adversarial relationship with the government. The media has, by definition, an adversarial relationship with the government, with the authority, with those in power. And that should be on behalf of the people, nevertheless. And therefore, the media cozying up to power, media cozying up to the corporate sector, media cozying up to establishments and leadership establishments may not be a healthy trend or a healthy sign for democracy itself. And this is also, I think, happening particularly in the corporate sector in India. I find that the corporate media tends to be very, very compromised. In fact, as we discuss, I'm happy to look at this. I don't even know how many of the media organizations or media newspapers, some of them, are able to survive, because objectively the advertisement revenues will show you that they can't be running. Their subscription figures will show you that from subscription revenues they can't be running. So they are obviously quietly funded. There's a lot of angel investment or devil investment, the way you want to look at it, by corporate bigwigs of some of this media. And that means they're already, these are the new trends which are also worrisome in a section of the media. The political media, part of the political media's main fault, as I said, has been immaturity, excess, lack of ethics, and corruption, and there's no doubt about that. But at the end of the day, I think in the balance, the media is a sine qua non of democracy, and more so in the context of India, where the media has played a very crucial role in bringing issues out into the open, and hopefully where the media works, fights, discusses, discloses on behalf of the public, or the publics, or the public sphere. I'll limit my opening observations to this. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And I'll request Sevanti Ninan to.
Actually, some of us were told to talk about leadership in media, so I had gathered together some thoughts on that. There's a paradox in India as far as leadership in the media goes, because there are three kinds of leadership. The first is editorial leadership, leadership by the quality of your journalism. The second is, market leadership, and the third, which is who is leading in circulation and revenue, and this applies to TV as well as newspapers. The third is technological leadership, which, as Sashi said, is blogs and so on, but it's also, media has become such a loosely defined word that it's also something like Google, where it's really a creature of technology married to excellent marketing initiatives. It was the first search engine to come up with the thought of AdWords. So it made it a prosperous search engine, which has then been able to go into so many things like creating Google Earth and all of that. So there's this whole technological leadership and the emergence of things like Facebook and Google thanks to the internet. Okay. Now, mostly our the problem is today, mostly our newspapers and TV channels are, I think, sensibly enough, I guess, in pursuit of market leadership. Because suddenly media has become this, there's been a lot of growth, as you all know, in the last decade at least, and it's become a highly competitive situation. And in India, you have a situation where 90% of the revenues of at least English newspapers and TV channels and Hindi TV channels, if not of regional language newspapers, 90% is the breakup, 80 to 90% has to come from advertising, not from the cover price of publications. So all of this, and in any given market today, the logic is number one and number two make money and the others don't. So there's a lot of, the striving is to get market leadership. And the quality of media that results is led by what the market seems to demand. Now, I'd just like to mention at the outset also that in terms of the international media, at least as far as print journalism goes, we are in the position of almost being the newspaper capital of the world, because we're number 2 now next to China of all places. Because in fact newspapers are dying because of internet and so on in most parts of the Western world. And India literacy is still growing, we're still growing. And we have these huge, I mean, we actually have, Times of India now sells like 3.5 million, which is compared to 2.5 million for the largest US newspaper, USA Today. New York Times and so on are in the range of more of 1 million and so on. So we actually have several papers which are as large as the New York Times, let's say. But then you come to, okay, that is numbers and that is size, and then you come to, of course, what is, how do they lead by their journalism or not? And the kind of benchmarks for excellence that have been set by very big newspapers in other countries, have we reached those or not, and are we anywhere near it? If the market leaders were also leaders in journalism, then we would feel good about this whole media boom that we have today. And that seems to be less and less the case. Over the last few years, what has become noticeable is there is a distinction between getting market share and between getting mind space. You will have, just at the basic level, take something like Doordarshan, which just by virtue of being a terrestrial broadcaster has more market share really than all these satellite channels. But I mean, is Doordarshan getting mind space in any sense? Is it claiming any mind space at all? Then you have something like the Indian Express, which everyone would agree is one of the leading newspapers in terms of its journalism, and it simply does not have the management depth that allows it to also be something that claims market share. So whereas it has the mind space, it's been steadily losing circulation over the years, and is now number 8 or number 7 or something among English newspapers in the country. A lot of English newspapers like Telegraph and Deccan Herald in fact sell more than the Indian Express, also because the company split and it became 2 Indian Expresses. But there is this problem that those who get the ratings do not even practice what you would recognize as journalism. If you look at television and you look at things like India TV, and those who don't get the ratings, those who are, you take a company like NDTV, which used to do a lot of very good programs, but the tighter the market grows, the more difficult it gets to get advertising, the more difficult it gets to sell serious journalism to the advertiser. Everybody starts cutting back on their travel, on the number of reporters you put in, on the quality of their journalism. So that is a paradox that has emerged today. If there is anyone to blame for the state of affairs, I'm afraid part of the blame, or most of the blame, comes from the media consumers, because we're a very unusual country where nobody wants to pay for the media. It is a fairly expensive proposition to give you all these hundreds of bulletins from all over the country, all kinds of news. But Indians have the cheapest newspapers. I mean, 1 month's Times of India is equal to like 2 or 3 or 4 copies of an American newspaper in terms of what it costs. And so, if you don't want to pay for your media, you end up with the advertiser paying for the media and the media following the tune of the advertiser. So that is a bit of a problem. It's a major problem. Okay. The other point I just wanted to make was when we're talking about leadership, exemplary ethics should also be the function of leadership. But in India, you have a situation where the biggest newspaper in India and the world, which is the Times of India, has actually been setting amazing trends in dubious ethical standards. So we're really at this cusp where your leadership is assuming strange forms, and ethics is something which has become a very variable commodity in journalism today. I think I'll stop here, raise some issues, and hand it over to Gayatri.
Thank you. May now request Gayatri Chandrashekar.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Today's theme, from what Mr. Pani and Ms. Sangeeta informed me, is peer celebration and the Indian media. And I do have a prepared note, which I would like to read to you, because I think that would set the trend for a particular discussion, focused discussion on peer and celebration, as we see, as generated by the media, as also as potential way to exploit the people out of fear and celebration by the Indian media, and I would like to read this. Fear, celebration and the Indian media. Over the last 15 years, India has seen a total transformation by way of growth and influence of the media. What started as a trickle, the beginnings of change in the 70s of the last century, with the advent of a variety of news magazines, turned into a flood in the mid-90s. Assisted by satellite television and supported by cable networks, Indian ingenuity and enterprise have affected the emergence of several new TV channels, quite a few got 24 hours news channels. The worldwide growth of the internet, allowing access to a mind-boggling mass of information, and the increasing penetration of broadband facilitating delivery of picture and video have given the Indian consumer a wide gamut of choice available on demand 24 hours a day, every day. In addition, our nation has a vibrant film industry, a mature newspaper and magazine readership, a radio listenership embracing all age groups, and a cell phone market, a potential medium that grows and grows. I think last count it was 35 crores cell phones density in India. One can say without fear of contradiction that we are a media-rich country and that we can rightly be proud of a free and independent private media. It is said that the way to access an organization and to assess an organization is to see how it has grown. By this yardstick, we have to admit that the mainstream media, newspapers with the exception of a few and a majority of TV channels and their online editions, give us a choice only in numbers and not in content or variety. Specifically, TV channels display an obsessive competitiveness to give the first visual, the first soundbite, and the development of the moment that they call the breaking story. The need for truthfulness, the imperative to check the vested interest masquerading as sources, and explanation and analysis do not get the same level of fascination. History is full of the media playing its role in exaggerating fear. Media-induced fears about bicycles, microwave ovens, cell phones, comic books, etc., have been well recorded. More recently, the fears generated by the media about the effect of the year 2000, Y2K, because the coders used only the last 2 digits, proved unfounded. Those organizations that had taken corrective steps and those that did not had nearly the same level of quality from their computers. Coming even closer to the present, the death of 3 infants in Tamil Nadu of causes other than the administration of the oral polio vaccine was the story repeatedly aired by a Kannada TV channel. This repeated telecast of the story led to widespread rumors, panic and misery to thousands of parents who rushed to hospitals all night in Bangalore, Mysore, Anekal, Ramanagaram and several other towns. Maybe the story was wrong, or maybe it was misunderstood. In any case, it was not worth reporting on. The reference to the oral polio vaccine could have been totally avoided in the story. Can media indeed generate needless fear? Indeed, it can. For a day, the house-to-house vaccination could not be carried out due to the hostility of the parents. This event illustrates how powerful the audiovisual medium can be in communicating fear. On the other hand, fear can be a powerful vehicle to carry a message. An example is the anti-smoking ad carried by many channels. Showing the ill effects of smoking, the ad associates the habit rather harshly with death. It portrays smoking to be not at all fun as the youth tend to view it. I am sure non-smokers among you will agree with me that this ad is quite effective in carrying a message in public interest because it associates smoking with death. 24-hour television has an enormous capacity for hype, harping on just one story and one video footage endlessly. Consider the Arushi murder case. The satellite and cable news networks went overboard, casting aspersions on the character of the dead girl and her deadest father. Truth and checks on one's sources become the first casualty. The viewers become fearful of the unexpectedly speculative, unfounded gossip in the garb of news. The fear of being left behind trips both the reporter and the editor, but they must understand that there is no use in hastening with the story if one is facing the wrong direction. So much freedom without responsibility neither helps the media nor the people. During the coverage of the Mumbai carnage too, competition got the better of the TV networks. As have been pointed out many times, the hiding places of hostages were revealed, terrorists got platform in the midst of their conversations, and the descent of the commandos, even as they landed on the buildings under siege, was shown live, needlessly helping the terrorists. Now we need to wait to see how well the emergency protocols will be adhered to in the future in view of the enormous clout and lobbying power that the media heavyweights have shown. Influential sections of the society need to acquire the skills to manage the media. Political parties are aware of the need and regularly conduct workshops in media management for their emerging leaders. It will be appropriate to recall here that during the hijack of the Indian Airlines aircraft, the relentless pressure from the media and the helplessness and rage exhibited by the members of the affected families, as seen by millions every day, necessitated the release of dreaded terrorists held at Kandahar in exchange for the release of the hostages. Gathering footage with hidden cameras, the channels seek to bring to the fore the seamy side of public life. Party leaders have lost positions, members of parliament have had to resign, and many a reputation has been lost to the hidden camera. Is the hidden camera put to use in public interest, or is it a vehicle for blackmail? The mixed verdict on this technique concedes that such extreme steps are needed in a society of eroding values in public life. The hidden camera has put a lot of pressure and fear, particularly on politicians of all parties. What do the channels themselves fear? Falling TRP ratings. In identifying, covering and airing news stories, the driving forces are the eyeballs, as Sevanti just now mentioned, and the ad revenue. Stories that make a difference to a majority of people, stories that need a decent level of knowledge of economics, industry, science and technology, etc. are all given the go by because the channels see no immediate benefit from them. Is there a deep divide between the haves who hog the media's art lives with an audience of people like themselves and the media have-nots? Yes, there is. The natural corollary, the anchors have no patience with contrary points of view. You would have surely noticed that quite often they look like self-opinionated persons. The average viewer would much rather hear the expert on the panel speak if only the anchor would allow him the few minutes to explain his viewpoint. What does today's media celebrate? Success, money, name and fame. Particularly valuable are the 3 C's: cricket, cinema and commerce. In all 3 are the jingles of money. Entire 24-hour news channels, entire 24-hour channels have come up, lauding lifestyles and good times. They cleverly persuade the viewer to buy things she does not need. Lavish weddings and ostentation and excesses are glamorized to no end. Do the channels show concern for the appalling high illiteracy, poverty, disease and hunger, as they do in showing the reopening of the Taj and the Trident, for instance? Among the conventional media, the newspapers face stiff competition among themselves and with the other media. Even reputed newspapers traded off their feature sections in exchange for ads. It is not uncommon for us to see a mention of a product or institution in the editorial matter side by side with the ad on the same page. The lines of editorial independence have got blurred. The regional language papers take up extreme positions in their stories of disputes with neighboring states. They pander to the local sentiment, marshal the extreme stance, play on fear and make it impossible to resolve conflicts. This type of emotional rather than rational or legally correct stories lead to hardening of opinions. Conflicts get that much more difficult to resolve. District papers go even further. Influential as they are in their own way, some are little more than rags, feeding off the local politician or person of influence. The badge of journalism comes handy in ways not quite appropriate. Can we do without the current explosion in media? Certainly not. The hunger for knowing the news as it happens has been stoked and cannot be put out. The many media professionals whom we see every day on screen are larger than life personalities. Their faces, voices and mannerisms make our day. The right approach will be to point out where they hurt the sensibilities of the people and persuade them to move in the direction of the common, larger good. The media have been led by technology in recent years. Now they need large inputs of conventional editorial wisdom. Even when the media are influencing events as they happen, even when reporters and editors need to be fearless, frank, taking risks to find out the truth, probe, authenticate and deduce, there must be concurrent streams of balance and checks every step of the way. So I think fear and celebration, as I see in the Indian media, I have touched upon, and now I leave to Pani to carry the discussion.
I'd just like to, obviously we need to go out to get questions from everybody, but there are at least 3 issues that I'd just like a reaction from the panel itself to see whether there is any kind of unanimity there. So I'd like to begin by requesting Sevanti to react to Shashi's comment that the media must necessarily be adversarial.
In a sense, yes, to the extent that it depends what country. If you're talking about a wonderful, prosperous country where everybody is equal and everything is fine, there's no problem. But in a country like India, where you assume, first of all, a fair level of corruption, you assume misuse by those in power, I think it helps if the media doesn't get fat and cozy and is fairly adversarial with research, with proper facts and figures in its stance, because you have to constantly be fighting on behalf of the guys who don't have a voice.
It is very important that the media remains independent, because like Sashi Kumar pointed out just now, business journalism has cozied up to the corporate sector. They have taken every handout as the gospel truth. I would say that the corporate sector is equally to blame, because when a business journalist actually asks for more information, it is not forthcoming. I am sure you have also experienced the same thing, that they will only they exploit the media as much or much more than the politician. I have done all kinds of stories, business stories, political stories. So the politician is, because he is accountable to the people, he needs to be accessible. The business person, he is not accountable to the media, nor is he accountable to the people, he is accountable maybe to his board of directors and to his boss. And therefore, they stonewall all efforts to ferret out information. That is the reason I think business journalists have to be not doubly careful. I think they need to be many times more careful in reporting, because it doesn't serve any purpose. Doing that kind of journalism, I think, is going downhill all the way.
Shashi, if you could just come on this whole area that we've been talking about a decline in ethics, we've been talking about this whole area of advertising-led journalism leading to this. Somewhere along the way, it's an odd mixture of one level of a kind of determinism, saying with advertising-led you're going to get this, and another level they're saying it should not be that way. The issue is really how, I mean, if it's inevitable, then what do you do about it, and is it inevitable?
No, I don't think being advertising-led alone is a problem. In fact, whatever your source of revenue, whether it's through subscription or through advertisements, these are the two known sources now. It's important for a news organization, whether it's a newspaper or a channel, to get good revenues, because the more financially sound a newspaper or a channel is, the more independent it will become. If it's not financially sound, the chances are it will start crowding up, cozying up, either to the government or to the corporate sector, because if its revenues are in doubt, it will be that less independent. So I think a healthy bottom line, in terms of financial bottom line, a revenue bottom line, is important for precisely the kind of independence we want of the media. But the point is, and in the Indian context, it's true that, as Sevanti said, in the English mainstream media, 80 to 90% it is advertisement driven. I don't know whether that model changing will take place either, because if a subscriber has to pay, you will again make it a very elitist media, which means a whole lower middle class section will not be able to afford the media. If you have to pay 20 rupees or 25 rupees, which may be the cover price without advertisement for a newspaper per day, how many people can afford the newspaper? Then you're not talking about a mass medium at all. You're talking about, as I said, a very segmented medium. So advertisement-led media is there for, I mean, that's a reality check in terms of the Indian context. The point is that, as I think Gayatri suggested, some of the core values and cardinal principles in the media have collapsed. The sacred wall between advertising and marketing, editorial and marketing has collapsed. Now the advertiser tends to be running or deciding what the editorial should do, or the editorial section should do, what stories should be covered and how they should be covered in a manner that doesn't trouble or doesn't worry or doesn't step on the foot of some vested interest. So these are the new trends. And it's particularly, I think, strong over us in financial journalism or business journalism, because as they say in Bombay, where really stock market journalism goes on, the size of the coverage depends on the size of the cover that you get at the press conference. So that's also a problem. So this whole handout journalism, and these are concerns, and they are exerting pressure on the other mainstream political journalism itself, because that's becoming, in some sense, a dominant form of journalism as well.
Would you say these trends are new after the cover that you speak about is as old as Indian journalism?
No, in the olden days they would give you a flask and a diary and all that. No, nobody wants all this. They want car cash, in cover. So it's got worse. Yeah.
Just so we can, yeah, please.
Well, I don't know. Maybe that is that cover journalism must be prevalent in Delhi, probably. It is not so in Bangalore. I'm sure you will agree. Even it was still here. It is still the flask or the occasional gift or whatever it is. Maybe a box without nothing inside. But I can tell you, one thing I need to tell you is, it is not just journalism that is suffering due to lack of money. You take, for example, take a dancer or a musician. How much are they able to take? See, somebody like Balamurali Krishna, or somebody like, let me say, at the top position now, Jayashree, Bombay Jayashree is now very well known. Such people are, they do get a lot of money, but the equally good ones who are not that famous are not able to make money. If they make some 2,000 rupees in a concert, they are very, very happy. Now, how many concerts in a month do you think they get? At the most 3 or 4 concerts. Now, how do you expect them? This cannot become their profession, So this issue is not confined to journalism alone, of not making enough money. by and large, our middle class are unwilling to pay, whether it is for a newspaper or for a music concert or for a dance or going to a picture gallery or whatever. They are unwilling to pay for a very exalted kind of experience. They do enjoy it. They like reading the newspaper. They read it from the first page to the last. They enjoy, 3 hours of a music concert or dance or whatever it is, performing arts. But they are not willing to pay for it because maybe we have spoiled them. They have been given this on a platter for so many years. They are not willing to change their habit now. Now look at the AIR. They don't charge anything. Every day they bring you 5 wonderful music concerts. Doordarshan brings quite in public interest they do this. Not that they do not make any money out of these classical music and dance concerts. Maybe that is part of the problem. Because they give it all free, nobody is willing to pay. Now when shall we start paying for these things? I don't know. They are not willing to pay. That is the bottom line.
You can just go back to the distinction you made between journalism in different places. I just tried to get Sevanti in on this. In the context of the work you've done on the Hindi press, what would you see as the main differences in the structure of the media itself between Hindi and English?
Well, first of all, the top papers in the country, the Hindi states were those parts of the country which 15 years ago hardly had, were the lowest in terms of literacy. And today those are the states which have the highest readership. The Hindi papers used to be nowhere in the top 10 readership charts, then they climbed to the very top over a very short period. So, because of the growth of literacy, because of the growth of purchasing power. By the way, all Hindi newspapers cost more than all English newspapers. They cost at least 350 because there's not that much advertising at that level, which can, so the thing is more. For whatever. So what happened was, but you don't have, they began to expand very fast. They expanded into villages and small towns, what we call kasbas. And there's almost semi-rural areas, all of which places have no journalists to report the news. So the one difference with the Hindi press is that it has, I would say, large numbers of its journalistic staff are not journalists, and most of the time, or quite a lot of the time, they're not even paid. They are what we have learned to call citizen journalism, except that this is a co-opted citizen journalism. It's not the kind of citizen journalism that is being admired and pushed today, where citizens take it into their hands to report what they know. But it's a situation where you pick up a guy in a village, you give him a card of your newspaper, and you expect him to report, but he cannot stand up, so he will not do anything adversarial at that level. That man cannot stand up to the district magistrate or to the BDO even. So there is a problem. That is a kind of co-opted citizen journalism, and his job is also to collect advertising for the newspapers. So the quality of journalism and the challenges of journalism are different in the regional press, which goes down to the very, very small towns and has many editions. They have lots of editions. Every district has at least 3 Hindi newspapers now, pullouts, 4-page pullouts. So that's the difference.
In terms of the quality of coverage, you think advertising-led journalism and this kind of stuff?
No, but the interesting thing about coverage is, the whole concept of who a newsmaker is has changed when you bring in that kind of district journalism. The whole concept of what you cover, all those little things, all the potholes and the bad roads and the schools that don't teach, all of that, when you have to fill 4 pages with local news at a district level, then a lot of things, civic issues which never came on anybody's radar are now coming up and becoming news, which is one wonderful thing which has been happening because of the regional press.
If you could just, before you throw it open to a larger audience, I just want the same issue really, one last question. If you were to choose between the kind of decline in journalism that's happened due to the advertising-led trend in English journalism and the decline that's happened due to the other factors you mentioned in Hindi journalism, which would you prefer?
Well, the Hindi journalism is not in decline, it began like that. In the sense that the expansion is predicated on a certain...
You prefer their value system, their structure? I mean, just the end result, not in terms of...
I think, see, both are not to be dismissed. Both are playing a role in the sense that, if you're talking about a decline in English journalism, all English journalism has not declined. You have
of an ethical standard and how that's being challenged
But
now.
I mean, you have some papers like the Hindu and so on who try to stick to their ethical standards. And you have some channels also which try to stick to their ethical standards. Well, the thing is, the loot is much bigger at the level of the national, so-called national media, because, you know, the stakes are much higher. Those little fellows, I mean, even if they're corrupt with very small things.
It may not be true of all regional press. Would it be, Shashi? Would that hold for the Marans?
No, I think it's true that where you have a subscription-driven model, you have to be relevant to the reader's requirements and appetites. Otherwise, he's not going to subscribe. Whereas if you're just dependent on 10 big advertisers, which gives you 90% of your revenues, or 70% of the 90% of your revenues, who are you accountable to? You're not accountable to the people. In fact, as you know, the economics of journalism is that if advertisement doesn't keep pace, if every extra copy that you print runs you into the red. So that's the big nature of the problem, the crisis. And so I think the people's the expectation from a newspaper is better borne out in the regional language press, is my sense now.
This is one last question, that if the advertising revenue is hit by this global crisis as it is, do you see a return to the subscription model?
No, because the cover price can never be met with the subscription of a newspaper, but there may be marginal increases. Newspapers which are selling at 1 rupee a day, which is as good as giving it free, like they do in Britain, they give it free in the subways and so on. They may raise it to 2 rupees or 2, but it would still not meet their costs. So I think the advertiser is going to be a crucial component. But I think it's also diversification of the media. The media is going online. Classified advertisements are becoming very important, a source of revenue, a newfound source of revenue. So I think that diversification and dispersion of revenues from just 5 or 10 big advertisers is a healthy trend that's happening also because of technology.
Okay, questions from around the table. Let's start from this side over.
Yes, my question goes to Mr. Sashi Kumar. In its aggressiveness on revenue, often media embarks on sensational news. And when it is proven to be wrong at a later stage, it regrets or issues to rejoin the origin. But by then the extensive damage is done. What is the accountability of the media? Any checks and balances? Why it is not focusing more on nation development? Number two, this question goes to Ms. Sevanti. You mentioned about the dubious ethical standards. It is heard that one TV channel is soft in its approach towards Pakistan, because that is being permitted to telecast in the country. Comments on that?
Correct. So that we're just running short of time. So if you can do one, just restrict ourselves to one question each.
Very quickly on the issue of sensationalism, this is one of the big problems of the media, particularly the electronic media, television media, that is sensationalist. The reason, of course, is that in the era of 24/7 news, and you must remember that the electronic media, television, is relatively new. It's 30, 40 years, as against 200-year-old history of the print. That's not to justify it, I'm just trying to explain. In 24/7 news, what does happen is, when you have news on top of the hour, at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, at 10 o'clock, at 11 o'clock, between 8 and 9 o'clock in the morning, most of us in the news media know there is no fresh fall of news. There is no new news coming in. But you can't give the same news at 8 o'clock as you gave it, and repeat the same news at 9 o'clock, because the viewer is going to say, this fellow is not doing his work, he's just peddling old stuff. So you start giving it a construct, you start adding hype to it. So the same story tends to get discussed more and more and hyped, and the spin is attributed to it. I think this is one way in which sensationalism becomes an intrinsic part of the media. The other reason, of course, is that in 24/7 live television news, something just comes to you fresh and you don't really have time to verify it because you have competing channels, so you put it out. After you put it out, you realize that it's really not what you thought it was. You hear there's a bomb, you hear there's a blast, let's say in Gurgaon. You would say there's a blast in Gurgaon, you super it, and finally it turns out to be a domestic gas stove or something. but then you say you are trying to sensationalize a domestic gas stove. So it's really partly problematic. But then it's also true that for competition reasons you also hype, you also sensationalize. But the problem is really the viewer, the reader also, the consumers. Because you expect that voyeurism, you expect this kind of sensationalism from the media. There used to be a time when you say, what a dull day it is, you know. Now you don't say that, you say what a dull newspaper it is. Because you expect a rape, you expect violence, you expect murder, and if that's not reported, you think the newspaper is not quite there. So I think that's also the nature of the problem. So it's a kind of vicious circle in which this is proceeding. But why not positive news? I think certainly. But I think positive news, I would be very wary of it because that's when you move into this kind of crony journalism. We have seen that 20-point programs. I was part of Doordarshan. I've done a lot of this. 20-point programs being this. We knew every bit of it was a lie, but we were disseminating it to the nation in the name of a government program. You start putting out handout journalism as free journalism. So there's a bigger danger than that. When positive, you must know when to look at. I think the role of a journalist is to look at more the negatives than the positives. I do believe that, honestly.
Quick response, if you please.
I mean, I don't know what Pakistan, I don't know what you're referring to. He's referring to some channel which is soft on Pakistan because
No,
of
then
something.
we'll pass on that.
I am not very sure.
No, let's pass on that because there are some other questions here.
Oh,
You mentioned about the editorial leadership. I think this is what is lacking, in especially the television media, the editorial leadership. In fact, because of the good editorial leadership that we had, even the newspapers today are able to survive in this environment. They are only trying to. We are only trying to play a game of one-upsmanship and trying to focus on very wrong issues. So if there is a good editorial leadership in the television media, I'm sure there will be equally good number of patrons for channels, and the whole mindset and the fear that you mentioned will also go. I mean, it doesn't matter if the news comes 3 hours late, but if it comes accurate and it's more realistic, I'm sure there will be more. Today, I mean, I've been reading Times of India and I would like to read Times of India always. It's a fact.
But Ninan from DRDO. Madam, this first thing is on, you were talking that All India Radio giving a free concert, you will not charge anything. I am also from Government of India, All India Organization, DRDO. I think when it comes to business model, we are Government of India are a part of the system. That's what I look at that way. So because when it's a private channel, they will be looking at the profit model. We don't look at that. Like for example, we train so many engineers and some private companies hire them at not even they not spend any money on that. We spend lakhs and crores on training engineers. But like MNCs, just hire them, just paying higher salary. So I think we have to leave with that. Otherwise, on the strand ties and the loss makeup by the advertisements, in my opinion, finally the customer will pay for the ads also. Any company who is giving an ad will charge for that, and I think 15-20% of the profit is always reserved for the ads only. So that's my opinion. Otherwise, coming to Sashi sir, morning we were having a discussion with Professor Madhav. We were talking on the integrity of the judiciary and corruption. Morning you were indicating that media is making a big hype of the corruption in judiciary. And in that case, I indicated that, first wing, the legislature is understood is already corrupt. And second wing, executive also is corrupt. So why not, the third, why not accept? Common man is already accepted, that's what I told. Now you mentioned that even the fourth estate is also, in that sense, they want to cover, they need money. Anyway, I was thinking that you are only accepting the compliments, but you told that they are also accepting cover. I don't know what your opinion.
Well, I don't want to give the media such a bad name, but I'm saying corruption is there in the media, and that's a cause for concern in the media. on this, judiciary. Yes, I think there's greater scope for judicial tolerance of the media. This whole contempt of court is being taken, willy-nilly now. Anything you say, the judiciary keeps pulling you up, and that's not a good trend for a free media. I think it's fair to say that the judiciary needs to be also put in, look at itself, to introspect, and the media must be allowed to convey that process of introspection to the public. That's the role of the media. Currently there's a debate about whether the members of the judiciary need to disclose their assets. I don't see what's wrong with, I would think that's one of the first things they should volunteer to do, whereas they are seeing it as a kind of erosion of their powers. So there are a lot of issues. I think judiciary also has to go a long way in the Indian context.
This is Sevanti.
I'm particularly happy that all three of you have touched upon ethical values. I think it's very important. Now, my thinking is that how is that high technology, which is now emerging, is helping the print media, and is it making it easy for the people to do what they do? And of course, always we talk about human resources. Are we getting good people? Because you're running journalism school, college. Are we getting people who are worth with ethics to go into journalism? And then I'm also afraid that the newspapers and the media are very strongly influencing the opinion, the way in which you have to look at things. And this is a big danger which I foresee with the media as today. And I know that the weakness of the people when it comes to press. If my name is there in press, I am ready to go down to any level, and I handle people from press in my research center. Two things I observed, that my colleagues are going out of the way to tell things which they are not supposed to tell, and the press demanding all sorts of things. And I think this is something which amazes me, so we decided that we will not call many press people. This is again where ethical values are coming, and exploiting the weakness of the people to see a name on the press. So I'm worried that the media's role in opinion formation, ethics and all, because all these things are connected to leadership, which we are looking for. So
I'm sure Sevanti has something to say about this as well. But I'll just touch on one or two issues. Yes, I think the technology is very crucial in the modern media. The whole technological convergence really helps media, gives it a fillip literally, makes it helpful, gives it a quantum leap. And in the information world, we know that, especially in the media sector, what were earlier separate sectors are coming together. That's what we call technological convergence in the media. Specifically, if you imagine them as three circles, say print and publishing as one circle, broadcast and cinema as a second circle, cyberspace and internet as a third circle. Convergence means an overlap, a coalescence of these three circles. So that is, I think, that process, we are living through that process, and that you can see the impact of that on the media very, very strongly. So a lot of the young people who come into the media are digitally thinking. They are thinking as technologically convergent practitioners of the media. I see that with students who come to the ACJ. They're already very computer savvy. They know the sources of news. They know how to go out to the internet and get background stories. The problem is they tend to plagiarize. They tend to cut and paste and pass it out as their stories. So those are the ethical problems that come with this kind of technology. So that's one aspect. The other aspect which struck me about what you said is this temptation of the media. And I've never understood this. Why should qualified, eminent people in public life run after the media like this? They have powdered their noses. I've seen them waiting for 2.5 hours in a television studio to be given exactly 20 seconds when the program starts. Whether it's called a big fight or whatever it's called. And they are sitting there before people who are far less qualified than them to discuss what they are discussing, and anchors who know nothing about the subject, but they lend themselves to these situations. I don't understand this temptation of the media among intellectuals, and if intellectuals and academics and scientists and that community succumb to this, then that's the end of any dignity, in terms of society. So I agree with you. I'm 100% with you in restricting the approach to the media. This is what happened in Bombay. We blame the media for going, running riot there. Where were the authorities? They should have cordoned off the area. That's a scene of crime. Did we get to see when a jeep rammed into an airport in the UK? Did we get to see anything except a distant shot of something going up in flames? They cordoned off the area. The authorities, the leadership, they're at us. Here we allow them to run all over the place, and the scene of crime has their footprints, not the scene of criminals. And then we say the media, if the media is given a foot in the door, it will take the entire room. That's the role of the media, and the media should do that. But it's your job, if you think there's a law and order problem, if it's a national security issue, not to allow anybody there to a scene of crime and to regulate the information that's required.
Yeah, and as you've seen with the terrorism, each incident, I mean, basically the police don't have to come up with half-baked information, but for some reason they feel this tremendous pressure to call the media and keep giving out dribs and drabs. And then, if you look at it over 6 months, the same guy has contradicted himself. They create these masterminds, then they negate the last mastermind. But all this is because you don't have to rush to do a briefing. I don't know what they do, why they do it. Okay, I just want to, this opinion formation point. That's a bit unfortunate because there are all these very hyped panel discussions on television. A lot of people tend to get, make up their minds on an issue listening to it. But the fact is that you're always trying to get a very adversarial atmosphere going. It's not an explain and discuss kind of thing. Because of ratings and so on. Any television discussion and now tries to you'll get two people from the opposite poles and you basically want to fight. And if you have a fight, then it's a successful program. So that has been bad for opinion formation of most people. And then they do these wretched polls. You ask someone like Rajdeep Sardesai, how many people, 75% of how much, he will never tell you. They will not tell you how many SMSs we're talking about. It could be a very small number.
It appears that all news on success stories in science, research and development, successes in agriculture, all that is relegated only for Doordarshan detector. The other so-called high-class elite media, especially electronic one, just don't seem to take notice of it. Second thing is that tremendous phobias in this media. Radiophobia is not just phobia for radiation. Anything related to radiophobia.
Radiation phobia.
We call it radiophobia. Radiation. Anything related to radiation is portrayed in such a negative fashion that whatever little positive impact any achievements in that field would have done, that will be my And I have interacted with several senior journalists like Vital Narakarni and so many Doordarshan and all that. And every time I find that the nuclear energy, nuclear radiation related. And many of these stories, they come whole day, they will do shooting and all that, finally it is killed. It's never shot. Even these are again elite electronics. Why? Will there be any change in this attitude at any time?
Now, how do these biases get determined at the media? I mean, we know that, okay, there are biases, we say X sells, but how do we decide that X sells and not Y?
Yeah, I mean, I really don't know how they decided X sells, but they've made up their minds on this. And, well, they have their ratings or whatever. The ratings is a highly unsatisfactory system. Though if you talk to the ratings guy, they now say they cover 75 towns and all of that.
For ratings, I can tell you that whatever rating is done, it's only done for the satellite TV. Because the terrestrial network that Doordarshan has, which is a heritage item, which is an old network, nobody is counting. Because if Doordarshan asks what is the rating of DD1, they will say we don't count that. So who knows?
But you had DART, and what happened to DART? It was abandoned.
What has happened is, in DD1, the regional channels have been, the regional satellite channels have been putting pressure for larger and larger allocation of time. So therefore, they have encroached on DD1 to a great extent. So people really don't get to see all the Hindi serials and all that, because they tend to see the Kannada. I mean, in Karnataka, it should be Kannada, so therefore they get larger ads. So what is DD1? It differs from state to state, because one doesn't know. In some states it starts only at 5:30, and in another state it starts at 3:30 in the afternoon. Sometimes it's almost entirely it is Kannada in Karnataka, Tamil in Tamil Nadu, so one doesn't know. It's a very strange creature now. It has been decimated, so to say.
Can I just respond to that? How does this bias is? I have thought this through, and what appears to me is as follows. Why do all the channels, you said they get more and more of the same across channels, and how do they all devour on the same set of subjects? Obviously there's no 10 commandments happening every day saying these are the order of the news, So obviously I think what's happening is because of the competition. Now in a newspaper or a television channel, there's something called editorial meeting. And when they sit in an editorial meeting and the editor says, we have missed a story, what does he or she mean? What he or she means is not that there was a story out there. There could have been a science story, there could have been a good human interest story, which we did not cover. What they mean when they say when we missed a story is, our paper or our channel did not cover a story which another paper or another channel had. That's all. That's the concept of missing a story. Not that there was a story which we missed. Because that's the only way. The universe of stories, you don't know any better unless you know that somebody else covered it. So missing a story is what's driving what should be there. Not to miss a story is what's driving what's... So the logic is all the channels must not miss a story. If all the channels should not miss a story, they should all do the same stories. Therefore you get the same stories. I mean, it's very simple logic.
I can add to that what Sashi says. All channels, including DD, have a whole wall full of television sets tuned to all the different 24-hour news channels, including DD in Delhi. It is showing NDTV, then NDTV India, then Aaj Tak, whatever, Hindi, English, some 20 different television sets are actually showing what they are. So they just look over the shoulder, you know, who is doing what story. Then if I get a telephone call, let me say around 3 o'clock, I know some other channel has done a story and I shouldn't have missed it. So, but if I have a valid reason why I have not done it, they listen to it. At least DD listens to it. I say that it is not worth doing that story. I am coming to your question on editorial dilution. It is because the 24-hour channel has the same anchor who is sitting through, let us say, 8 hours, you know, under the lights. Where does he have the time to think what is editorial matter? It needs a brain of its own, you know. He should not be presenting with makeup on and, you know, asking questions to his co-panelists. That's not his job. He should have someone else to do it. Editorial matter should be decided by someone more competent but more of a thinking person. That is not happening.
My question is to Mr. Kumar. You were telling that media should be free to keep the issue on focus and it should be aggressive. Now, when you come to the, so that does it mean that all the ethics have to be put under the rug? I just want to, especially when it makes an inroad into individual's privacy. If I quote an example, a recent Major Unnikrishnan's dead body arrived in his house. There was an off-the-cuff remark by the Chief Minister of Kerala. Then media went into the house and thrust the mic in the father's mouth and asked, "What is your reaction?" Don't you feel there should be a Lakshman Rekha drawn? A thin line should be drawn where media should stop.
Absolutely. I think you're right. Ends where my nose begins, and that's true of the media as well. Media has no business to violate privacy, get into the bedrooms of people and make themselves a nuisance, especially in terms of privacy. And the media has been doing it all the while. In fact, the Major Unnikrishnan's thing was particularly pathetic in that context, but generally media does this and we don't notice it equally powerfully, or we are not so worried when they do it to the people who do not have the power to shall we say, say no or to remonstrate. If you look at the poorer people, they write roughshod over them. I mean, if you look at that rape case and somebody was killed, that Dhananjay killing, hanging in Calcutta some time back. The media was all over the place of that house of the person who was hanged, that poor man's father, mother, they were sitting with vehicles. They were literally, in that small hut, they were all, the media was literally using the hut as their home. Whereas we didn't get to see one spot of the girl's middle class home that was protected. So even there, we generally protect our own class, our own level of society. But when it comes to prostitution, for instance, we have no qualms about showing a woman who's been caught and just charge. And newspapers show her face, television channels show her face. But if it's a middle class, immediately it's all covered, and you will find. So this whole hypocrisy is also a problem in the media. I agree that privacy should be respected across the north. Not only privacy in life, privacy in death. No other country would have dealt with tsunami victims like we did in the media. We were showing dead bodies like as if it was garbage, and mass bodies being buried in mass graves. Did you get to see one body after 9/11 in the USA? You respect even the dead there. So media needs to really respect life, privacy of all classes indiscriminately, death, in death. So I think that's a absolutely very valid point. These are all because of this whole voyeuristic mold in which the media is cast, and again this whole mindless competition that if I don't get it, if somebody else gets it, what happens to me? Or a boy in the tube bell. It's almost becoming a syndrome now in India. Boy in the tube bell syndrome. The whole 24 hours, and poor boy would have been dead by this time. And with his breathing, did you hear the breath? Some other channel was saying, I think we heard the boy say mother. No, that is not mother, that is just there's just breath coming out. When it comes out from the tube well, it sounds like mother. All kinds of nonsense. They construct and build their own theories out of a tragedy like that. Or it's Aishwarya Rai's wedding with Amitabh Bachchan's son, 24 hours without even getting anywhere near it. They were all kept outside the wall. But they were telling us what is happening there as if they're seeing it in graphic detail. So media, there's obviously the problem. I don't think it's news telling, it's they're concocting stories, they're spinning yarn, and we are consuming it with great interest, and ratings are going up, advertisers are very happy. So there's a kind of vicious circle in what we want and what they're giving us.
And then it's a matter of your discretion. It's a matter of your discretion.
May I just carry forward the previous question, I mean what you rightly said. But then, you see, whenever we see very often now the press breaks the Lakshman Rekha, and even the government doesn't want to serve you on this. But there should be some mechanism, internal regulatory system within your said, where some kind of a restriction or a convention is made out on what to do and how to do. And one small clarification from Sevanti, if I heard it right, about the dubious distinction ethical standards, referring to the Times of India.
You know, they had a tiny, like 7-point or something thing saying MediaNet. They formed a company. They said, we give a lot of publicity to people. What nonsense, why are we doing this fluff journalism? Let's charge for it. So they said, okay, you want publicity, you come, 2 columns, 3 columns, these are the rates, only in the Delhi Times or Bombay Times or, that part, not they say in the main paper. So one is that they started charging for the news. First they used to indicate at the bottom it would say MediaNet, which means it had been paid for. Then they took that away. So today you can just guess as to which parts. So that is something which nobody else does and is not supposed to do. It's not a norm of journalism. It's not an ad. You put it there like a news item, but somebody's paid for it. That is one. Secondly, the practice of what they've started something called private treaties, which is, how do I explain private treaties? They, Times of India is very conscious of its bottom line about revenues and everything. So they've got into this arrangement where you form relationships with advertisers. By buying a stake in their company, Times of India will buy a stake in Pantaloon. In return, it will pay for the stake by giving you advertising, but it will also give you favorable coverage, which somebody has to sit and measure to see what kind of favorable coverage. And one instance, I run a little ethics website. So one story that was written for me out of Bangalore, for instance, is when there was a building accident here, and every paper except Times of India mentioned the name of the builder, and they had a private treaty with the builder. I mean, this is one of the private treaty companies. So it affects your journalism when you do all of this, and those are ethical issues.
Also, the channels too charge. I have heard that 16 lakhs is the money paid for a well-done interview by one of these, leading, yes. And also they run 4 newsworthy items in the runners. So that's all, they take money and they give you coverage.
I have the second question about the internal regulator, if you can have for yourselves.
There is, in fact, in October they set up a self-regulatory commission, or what is it called? Authority. So, because they did not want the government to regulate for them, the private guys, some of them got together and set up a self-regulatory authority. It has Justice Verma as its chairman and so on and so forth. Some of the things that were mentioned in the code that they put out for themselves, all were already there. The code that they later violated in Mumbai. So it's not as if, you may have it, you put it out there, but they didn't really stick to it when it came to practice. And their thing is that we will take complaints. So if somebody complains and they have a lot of qualifiers, under which the money you have to pay, first you have to write to the channel. If the channel does not redress your grievance, then only they will take the complaint. With all of that, so far nothing has happened as a result of self-regulation.
Since Times of India was mentioned, would you is it your view that there's no other paper doing anything like that?
It's started these two things. They're always the most innovative in these matters and other matters also.
There might be others as well.
Times, no, CNBC we all know, but Times at least has the gumption to say, I'm doing this and put it out there. They say they're doing it. CNBC, everybody knows, but we cannot prove it. No businessman will say, I have paid for my interview on that channel. And we know it, but we can't prove it. And so
widespread and just a single
yeah. I mean, everyone is. And sometimes you look at the Hindustan Times and say, God knows. I mean, the way it's been written hasn't been paid for, but we don't know.
I have one question from Mr. Sashi. This sting operation and for promoting detective journalism. What help you are taking from science and technology to promote such cases?
Science and technology has given us those wonderful cameras which nobody can detect. And mics, and in the form of a watch, a tie clip, a suitcase in which you can hide it, and so on and so forth. More and more. And because many of these are now being spotted, they're coming out with newer products almost on a 3-monthly basis. Because now the people are also getting wise to this. But other than that, I don't think it's really has anything much to do with science and technology. It's a form of journalism, sting journalism, and if it's in the larger public good, as was indicated here, I think it's warranted. And in India, unfortunately, in many of these cases, you have seen that but for sting journalism, those stories would not have been exposed. Whether it is a leader of a party putting money into a drawer, whether it is about a prosecutor of one case having a discussion with the prosecutor of the other case, and so on. I mean, you've had a variety of cases where sting journalism has proved that has made a very big difference, a very, very crucial difference. There are also some cases where sting journalism has been carried too far. The Tehelka case, I think, to an extent it was very valid. After that, I think when sting becomes entrapment, there's a problem. Sting journalism is legitimate, entrapment journalism is not legitimate. What is entrapment journalism? If your idea is to test how good a person I am, and say, Sashi, I'll give you 100 rupees. Will you say something? Which is, or will you do this wrong? I say no. I'll offer you 1,000 rupees. I say no. I'll offer you 1 lakh rupees. I say no. I'll offer you 10 crore rupees. I say, what the hell? Yes. Then you say, I got him. He's taken 10. He's agreed to take 10 crore rupees, and he said yes. That's entrapment. Because everyone may not be a Gandhi, and the role of journalism is not to check people's moral thresholds. The role of journalism is to check whether in the normal course of duty somebody does something which is illegal, uses his office to adverse purpose, wrong purpose. So often to get a sensational story, you push it to entrapment. Like the Tehelka did when they set up call girls to entrap some of those defense officials. Now if there is no clear nexus which comes that having wined and dined and used women, if a person has not actually, in spite of that, signed a bad deal, you have nevertheless ruined his reputation. See, the models are also people's private affairs, isn't it? So that's a problem area. Entrapment is a problem area. But sting journalism, I think, is valid, provided the caveat, I think to underline it, is the larger public good.
I have 2 questions. One is, as you have told, the kind of people who are in the media, whether self-regulation is good or government regulation is good. That is my first question. Another is that we generally see that, forget about science coverage, generally limited to cars and mobile phones and laptops. Media mainly covers politics, business, sports or page 3, whatever we call it. And rarely it gives regular coverage to main issues like critical evaluation of health and education program implementation by the government or such thing. Now, why there is no self-regulation or government regulation, whatever, in media to make it mandatory to cover these issues regularly?
My take on that is that media should only be self-regulation. There should be there's no scope for government regulation. First of all, media is indivisible. You cannot have a different set of yardsticks for print journalism and different set of yardsticks for television journalism. In terms of just the freedom, I'm saying. Of course, the 2 technologies are different. You cannot say television has a more psychological impact on people. Some of the bureaucrats, I know, are arguing this, that television and radio, for instance, they are not allowing radio to do news in this country because the argument is that radio reaches the least common denominator, reaches everybody, and therefore psychologically it will create a big problem, if we allow it. First of all, these people have no right because they are not psychologists. It's just some kind of pulp psychology and psychiatry they are practicing at the expense of freedom of expression. And secondly, that kind of division of the media is not warranted. Self-regulation, yes, it is important. Media must self-regulate, but any government regulation of the media will make it. You cannot have a less free media. It's a zero-sum game. You cannot have a media which is 75% free. It's either free or it's not free. There are no other classifications. So if you have any government regulation, it's a not free media. That will be called a sponsored media, a kept media, whatever you want to call it. It's not a democratic media.
Otherwise also it is like that.
Otherwise, you are right. In another sense, the media is also not free because this argument being raised. Today, I think the bigger threat to the media is not from the government. Because as you said, the government thinks of regulating but gives up the idea because it gives it a bad name. The bigger threat to the media today is the corporate interests. The corporate bosses, not the media bosses themselves, but maybe the advertising bosses, maybe the angel investors, maybe the quiet strings which are pulling the puppets in the media. So that's the bigger. The market is the bigger danger than the state. Not the state, but the market is the bigger danger for the media.
My second point, why not make it mandatory for the media to cover these main issues like health education?
Government-owned media can do that. In fact, the government missed out a huge opportunity. When Doordarshan was converted into Prasar Bharati, the idea was that it would become an autonomous corporation, like the BBC. But because the government always wants to use the media as its cat's paw, wants to use the media as a propaganda arm, they would, whichever government is in power, let's say Congress or BJP or whoever comes to power, they use the media like a propaganda vehicle. So they did not allow it to be. So Prasar Bharati is just another version of Doordarshan. So if it's, whereas BBC would have that, BBC will have a quota which says, so we must have so much science programming, we must have so much of this programming, because it's a public interest channel. It's a public broadcast philosophy driven channel. We don't have a public broadcast philosophy driven channel in India today.
Self-regulation can be.
That's difficult.
Yeah, my question was, we are in a leadership course, so most of us are having senior positions. We are handling independent charge of units. So could you give us some tips on proactive and reactive measures where leaders can take with respect to media? Some tips of handling the media, where people have gone wrong. Can you give us some?
No, but to what purpose, can I ask? Is it to get publicity? Is it to keep them at bay? What is the reason for wanting to tell us?
Let's say there is an incident in the unit, like I'm in the refinery, incidents do happen. And while we are training ourselves to handle the media, from your side you know the mistakes that we are making. So you could share some secrets with us that this is how we do it or this is how we don't do it. That's what I'm looking at.
You just, if you take the example of what the government could have done in the case of Mumbai, when you know a situation has happened or is developing, you decide who will do the briefing or what you will say, and you shut out, you say that my guy will come to the gate of the unit or whatever it is, and he will tell you what we have, and he'll do it at these intervals, and we cannot ask you to let you come in, or, and tell your guys that they're not supposed to. The point is, if you want to, I'm not suggesting, okay, that sounds terrible, that sounds like I'm telling you to control the media, but I'm saying that you have to have a line of communication, and you can't fool them or fudge it or anything, but you don't allow them to run amok. Just say, you want information, we'll give it to you, we'll give you as soon as we get it. So you have some regular briefings for 1 or 2 days, and that's it. That's my advice.
Actually, the government has been notorious in not paying attention to public relations. Doordarshan, for example, doesn't have a public relations director. Neither does the police department. Whatever they have is just someone who will tell you that this is the time of the press briefing, which is in the normal course, that is all that they are expected to do. But public relations is a very important role that every big organization, including the government, must have, but the government has not paid any attention to it. And at that level, at the director level, they must be able to think of all the possibilities that could evolve in a situation like that, and that has not taken.
One last.
I just want to say there has to be a designated person that could apply.
Last question. Yeah.
Like the last speaker, I do understand that media, like any other industry or other activities of our country, it's also undergoing a reform. It's something which came up very late, of late, both electronic and print media. And I do understand reform is not a one-time affair, it's a process. I have a specific question which I found when media was very successful, and I just wanted an input from all three of you. What is the state we are in? I'll go a little, I have to be a little long, but it is important. When you know that Fox News is a Republican, they get prime time for the Republican Party's position. Clinton News Network, or CNN, it's commonly known as Clinton News Network, gives a democratic view. And then you have ABC, CNBC, MSNBC, they are giving the views depending on market forces, advertisement, this thing, that thing. But what is wonderful about, which I have noticed, is the investigative reporting. We saw Watergate, downfall of President Nixon. There were many gates after that, all of the. In this particular unfortunate incident of Mumbai garments, the electronic and print media was very, very effective, shaping up the public opinion, which led to the downfall of the former Home Minister. Now that means the talent exists of the investigative reporting. The talent exists. I don't understand that you do have compulsions, yes, advertisements, so you have to show the person, etc. But why don't we use the talent to go for more investigative reporting and downfall of not only politicians, top businessmen, top bureaucrats? It comes, but I find that the investigative reporting is lacking. Do we lack that investigative journalism? What is your feeling? You are a journalist.
If we can have a quick comment from the three of you on investigative journalism, starting with what is the future of investigative journalism?
Investigative journalism can be done provided one commits people to it. Now, for example, if I have to run after the daily press briefing of some politician, also follow up on business story, also do the sports story when it is important enough, I cannot do investigative journalism. It requires dedicated money, funds, also full backing from the editorial team that come what may, your story, as long as it is true, as long as you are reporting the truth, will be published. It requires a great deal of commitment from the management side, from the editorial side, and a great deal of risk-taking on the part of the reporter. It should be done. I think there have been very good examples of some very good investigative reports. I think we should not let that go away. But the way now news rooms are organized with very few reporters, it cannot be done. It cannot be done if one has to do the day-to-day running around and then combine it.
Sashi?
Yeah, I don't think our record on investigative journalism is too bad. In a vast and diverse country like ours, not just the English press but regional press. In India, what does tend to happen is that the big investigative breaks are given by the regional press, not by the English press. The English press then follows up on that. If you look at most of the big, unless it's a financial story which affects Bombay and so on, you'll find that most of the political investigative stories come from the regional press. And then the English press actually hijacks it, takes it over and runs it, and the poor first man who broke the story is nowhere in the picture. So we've had an excellent record of investigating, and these regional reporters who investigate do it with far less resources or material. As Sevanti said, often they are bonded labor. I mean, they don't even get salaries, they just get the press accreditation card and they're asked to fend for themselves. So they do it out of pure passion, they do it with a sense of seriousness. I mean, they kill to be journalists in that sense. So I think our record on investigative journalism, to my mind, is excellent. The US is, of course, you get the big stories from the US, but we also have the stories of Jason Blair and so on, where they fudge, where there's also a lot of ethics, problems of ethics in investigative reporting happening in the US as well. So I think, like to like, I would think that our journalism is today as free, as irresponsible, perhaps slightly less mature than the US. That's all.
I think for investigative journalism, you need a good beat system, and like she said, it's very important. You need to put a guy on the job and leave him free to do that job. So I've noticed that most, or at least they say, a lot of TV channels don't really have beats. Today you're doing this, tomorrow you're doing that. You have to know a beat very well to know where the story is likely to break, or have your antenna up for it. So part of the problem is to develop cadres who will do such journalism within the outfit and to pay for them and all of that.
I think it's been an extremely fascinating discussion. It's been wide-ranging as we thought it would be. I'd like to thank everyone, not just for the questions they have raised, but also for those that are left unanswered, particularly on the ongoing conflict between ethics and the general trends within journalism. And it's one thing to say that there is a decline in ethics, there are ethical issues, there most certainly are, but where will it go in the next year or two, or even the medium term, is something that is difficult to hazard a guess. But I think the important thing is to raise issues, to be aware of it, and to recognize it as and when things happen. I'd like to thank Gayatri, Chandrashekar, Sashi, Kumar, and Sevanti for taking the time out and helping us understand the media so really better.
I request, I thank Professor Pani for coordinating this panel, and also request him to give Disney as memento. It's an appreciation of her. Thanks to all of you.